From there, we, in conjunction with the vendor that we were working at the time, decided to say, hey, how can we actually have a top-down approach in terms of solving problems? In other words, what AI cannot replace is the human creativity. It's that creative process in terms of looking at anything in a unique way and bringing forward a solution.
There is a question that sits at the heart of every conversation that I have within the podcast, the Activate Innovation Lounge podcast. And that is my deep belief that the most powerful source of innovation in any organization is not necessarily the strategy or the technology or maybe the dedicated innovation team, but rather the hidden innovator inside every single employee. Like not the people who have been mandated with the title and function to lead innovation, but rather the agent in the contact center who has been witnessing the same customer friction repeat on and on again. Or maybe the manager or the cashier at the branch office of a bank who continuously witnesses a crowd in the bank and is trying to identify ways to make it better. Or maybe even a new associate hired for risk management who recognizes that your organization may definitely need a new employee onboarding process in place. So what happens to an organization when you stop waiting for innovation to come from the top and instead you create conditions for it to be activated from within at every level, every role, every function, every day? What happens to an organization when it distributes and cultivates innovation capability across every corner? So that is the question that my guest today spends every single day to answer and to make it better and better. And she has the results to prove that this is not just a philosophical aspiration, but in fact, this is a successful strategic reality and an imperative for her organization. My guest today is Vlora Muslimi, the Senior Manager of the ID8 Program and Colleague Innovation at the TD Bank based in Canada, which operates across North America with over 100,000 employees. Since 2020, she has led Enterprise Innovation Program, which has activated thousands and thousands of TD Banker. To date, the program has collected over 100,000 ideas. And last December, the TD Bank lit Toronto's Union Station with 10,000 individual lights, one for every employee idea that was brought to life. And guess what? Each light gets activated by human movement, just like innovation. So today, I want to talk to Vlora and I want to understand what does it really take to awaken this hidden innovator in every one of us? What does it take to create condition for this capability to last and for every frontline employee to believe that they can share ideas because they matter? My name is Iliriana Kaçaniku. I'm your host, and this is Activate Innovation Lounge, a podcast dedicated to all the leaders with or without innovation in their title who want to figure out how to activate innovators, innovation, and innovation capabilities in their organization. If this sounds like you, hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to your podcast. And now let's welcome Vlora Muslimi to the conversation. Vlora Muslimi, it's an absolute pleasure to host you today, especially because compared to all the guests that I've had so far, I can tell you Përshëndetje dhe mirësekeardhje, which means hello and welcome to the podcast in our other native language, which is Albanian.
Thank you. Faleminderit.
Yeah. My pleasure. So I know about a bit about you, and I know the reasons why I wanted to have you at this podcast today. But before we go on into our conversation, why don't you share in your own words with the audience, who is Vlora Muslimi and how did Vlora get into corporate innovation in the banking industry in this case?
Thank you so much, Liliana. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'll dive right into it. Most innovation leaders come across innovation in almost by accident, and I would say, and I'm no different. I started out with TD Bank about 20 years ago, and I actually started out through an unconventional route through contact centers. And I noticed very early on that even though we trained folks to take customer calls and be able to resolve problems, a lot of the time the friction came in terms of the systems or sometimes even the processes. And I noticed that I had this passion about removing that friction and getting to the sort of final state as quickly as possible. And so again, that led me that those were my breadcrumbs to essentially resolving problems, making sure that processes worked for colleagues and the client versus only because that is something that the system is designed to do. And that led me through many different roles, 13 various roles across the bank, through digital, through strategy type of roles, and most recently in innovation, where I took on the enterprise program called Ideate, which I'm sure we're going to be talking about it in great lengths today.
An absolute perfect overture to the IDA program, because you know already I came across the IDA program and then I found you, because
Yeah.
in my reading of the program from all the information that you had shared with the public, I found it one of the best examples of how you activate internal employees. And you're also showing your life experience, professional experience is a proof that you don't have to hold the title innovator in order to innovate. Because at the end of the day, it's problem solving. It's so beautiful in your case, start with eliminating the frictions. But why did the TD Banks launch the Ideate program? How did it start?
Yeah, that's a great question. It actually started off in various businesses. People like myself who wanted to solve problems, who wanted to make things better organically, they started to have these informal type of committees or programs, however you'd like to call it, where they would essentially gather the ideas, be able to prioritize in a sort of informal ways, and then be able to implement them, and leadership started to hear about these problems that were being resolved at the employee level. Sort of very naturally, people were saying, this is not working for us. How can we make it better? And through connecting through other parts of the organization or talking to each other, they figured out ways to make things better. And they thought, we're onto something here. Why don't we formalize this in a better fashion and actually centralize this so that we can actually scale this? A solution that works in one line of business can very well work in another line of business. So by centralizing this and making it a more formal of a program, we can enable our colleagues to actually work even better with each other. And that's how it started. It started with various businesses. It was called different names. Once it was centralized and we launched it formally, that's when the momentum really started to build, because at that point in time we started to think about more of the formal elements that come together
Mhm.
to essentially grow the program and make it even more effective. So things such as a platform that actually collects the ideas and it has the ability to review and prioritize and finally implement, or is at least enable implementation. Things such as reward and recognition. All of these pieces started to come together once that formalized.
So the program started in 2019 and it has evolved significantly since then. And as you're saying, formalized to collect ideas. But in innovation, we know that ideas are not the starting point, it's the frictions, it's the problems. So
Hmm.
along the way, you have also adopted the challenge driven innovation model. And so, how do people or leaders or employees of the TD Bank identify the problems that are best solved via Ideate program? And in this case, I assume always challenge-driven innovation, or there are other ways that activate internal innovators.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what I would say is there's a couple of things here. The best way to spot friction or problems is the people that are closest to that friction. And generally speaking, for most organizations, those are the people that are actually speaking to the clients day in and day out. They're the ones who are fully can recognize what is getting in the way of getting things done. So ideate as a program very much started with employees bringing forward ideas that said, you know what, this is not working. Let's fix it. And then the system came from that. As it evolved, it as natural part of the evolution of the program, the challenge based innovation began because up until I would say 2022, 23, it very much functioned as a open idea box, so to speak. Any idea
Mhm.
was welcome, and the promise that Ideate had in place was to say that every idea will be reviewed and prioritized accordingly or closed if there's already a solution or not feasible or whatever the case may be. The challenge based ideation began in around 2022, 23, as we were coming from a period of the pandemic where we were in overdrive because, of course, a lot of organizations had to change how they were doing things. And of course, Ideate was a good source of pulling some of those ideas in terms of how to make things work in this new environment. From there, um, we in conjunction with the vendor that we were working at the time, Planbox, decided to say, hey, how can we actually have a top down approach in terms of solving problems? So while we had a very good mechanism in terms of identifying problems that employees were bringing forward, why don't we have a problem that a leader within a line of business puts forward, a relevant, real problem that a business has, open it up to colleagues within their particular business or even enterprise wide
Mhm.
and see what ideas come through. And there was a tremendous amount of success through this because, generally speaking, from a challenge based perspective, you need certain elements in order to make that a success. You need a clear problem that is with a very much a sponsorship behind it, the promise that once we get those ideas, they will be reviewed and there will be some sort of a selection to bring some ideas to life. Because at the end of the day, for any innovation to work, to keep that engagement, to keep those ideas coming, the promise of implementation has to be real. Otherwise, people will feel like there isn't an outcome that based on whatever they're putting forward. So, in a challenge based innovation, there's a clear sponsorship, there's a clear business problem, there is the employees putting forward the ideas. And once they put forward the ideas, there is some sort of a selection method to actually select the best ideas and move that forward. And what we found was that a lot of the times, there was not just one idea that could move forward. There were multiple ideas
Mhm.
that could move forward because there's no silver bullet for most business problems out there. You can come at it from different angles, and there's more than one solution that can go into place. And that's what motivated um, leadership, but also employees to really gravitate towards this type of innovation challenge rather, because it really came to light what was important to leadership and how can colleagues actually contribute towards solving those problems to be part of the solution.
You explained something very critical, and we know that rewards, the financial incentives, are a very important element of any challenge design. But more important than the reward is what happens after the award, the implementation. What's the implementation process that has worked for Ideate, and is implementation process the same for all the ideas that get rewarded with the implementation?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is no. The implementation process is not the same. So maybe a good time to also explain, looking back at this, I think it's an important distinction to make. So any organization that has 100,000 plus employees is made up of multiple lines of businesses. And so from an ideate perspective, there are teams of ideate within each line of businesses, and they operate specific to their specific needs. So that what that truly means is that, for example, wealth, or for example, our TD insurance team, they all have their own ideate program, and the challenges that they run, or their prioritization process, or which paths they choose in order to implement ideas, they are unique to that line of business.
Hmm.
And they have complete freedom in terms of how they operate. What we do as a centralized team, we provide best practices, we provide education, we provide guidance, we provide reward and recognition. We look at the centralized team as enablers for all the various teams across the organization who are essentially designing and customizing the program that works best for their line of business. So, with that in mind, in terms of how an idea comes to life, could look different from one idea to another. An idea can take, for example, 3 months to get implemented if it is, let's call it, something less of a heavy lift, like let's say a low hanging fruit.
An
Or it can,
incremental.
exactly. And a lot of what comes through Ideate, it is that incremental type of innovation. But there's also ideas that can take up a couple of years. So, for example, if it is an idea that is a feature for a mobile app, for example, a lot of the time that idea will go to that particular journey or line of business that owns that journey. And essentially, it has to prioritize based on their roadmap, based on the resources they have, based on the
Hmm.
funding. And as a result of that, it may have to be in a backlog for a while until that project prioritizes that particular feature in order to make it come to life. So, all in all, to say, there's systems and within systems that have to be at play, and therefore, as a result of that, depending on the idea and what it is, that journey of an idea, from an idea when it's submitted to the idea implementation, can look different depending on the line of business that it is, depending on how it came through. Challenge-based innovation, generally speaking, they come to life a little bit quicker than the open ideation. So all of these factors come into play in terms of how an ideas come to life.
I remember when we talked first, you also talked about the small I and a large I. So, like, if an idea is a small for like an incremental innovation, it will get more easily and faster prioritized and implemented. But if it's in a big I, then it goes to the centralized innovation team. Is that still the case?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're talking about is, as an ideas come through, they come, big ideas and small ideas come into play, and there are paths to making those ideas come to life, depending on those ideas. However, we also get ideas that what you will call big I type of ideas, and generally speaking, they may require, for example, a proof of concept. Potentially, they can require more resources, specific funding for that particular idea. And generally speaking, those require specialized teams, either within a centralized innovation type of team, or within, potentially, depending on the idea, within a line of business that has to drive that idea in a more focused way, I would call it. So, in other words, it's not something that you can integrate it as part of an existing system, but rather it requires its own project team, so to speak,
Hmm.
in order to make it come to life. And there are innovation pathways in terms of how to make that come to life, and they reside within the team. So we would hand it over to those teams to say, okay, is this an idea for consideration? Can we put it through a different type of innovation team in order to make it come to life?
Last year, you lit the Union Station of Toronto with 10,000 lights that each symbolized an idea that was implemented. And you already mentioned that you have already 100,000 employees. And so, with this huge portfolio of over 100,000 ideas and probably thousands of problems that you have addressed through challenge based innovation internal to the enterprise, have you come to identify the clusters of problems that are best candidates to be solved by internal innovators? everyday employees, with people who have tons of potential, tons of talent, tons of expertise, but do not hold innovation in their job title. So,
Yeah.
what problems are best candidates?
Yeah. So I would say that we can look at it in two different ways. So one is to say that what are the types of problems that we can solve or best suited rather for internal ideation. But another way to look at it is to actually to sort of flip it and say, looking at the types of problems that are coming in the program, what are the thematics? What are the types of problems that are most likely to be solved by internal colleague innovation? And essentially hone in onto that. Again, when you have volumes of this scale, you can use the data to actually find essentially what are the themes, what are the um, messages that you are getting from this type of program, and how you can essentially solution them at scale. Another way to address your question is to say that um, many problems that are very specific. So, in other words, require a deeper understanding of the products, services that the bank offers. Much of that requires understanding from internal colleagues in order to solve those types of problems. Now, I will also say that many times when we have these challenges and we have a specific problem, let's say to insurance, TD insurance, many times the best solutions come from outside of insurance because again, you've got that the diversity of employees that actually can look at it with a fresh pair of eyes as well. From I can't speak too much in terms of what would be best suited for external, but I think that if I was to take a step back and say what would be best suited for external type of solutioning, it would be most likely if you were looking to learn from industry. How do you take a common problem and look at it from a different angle
Mhm.
altogether. So if you look at it, if you can engage with the academia or potentially even clients themselves to say, how can we look at it a little bit differently? But again, from an internal colleague innovation, that there's a lot that can be solved. Again, just because the numbers are so large.
And especially an organization with over 100,000 employees, because even if you build a crowdsourcing platform outside, it's going to take a while before
Yeah.
you build a crowd of 100,000. But even if you do, that crowd is never going to be as homogeneous to understand the problem as might be the crowd already within the enterprise. So it is important to see the employees as the crowd that is already there and leverage their internal first-hand experience and what we call the tacit knowledge about the company in order to solve. Exactly. Somebody from insurance is going to have a great idea from the market or marketing or sales and vice versa. And that's how you're going to have the cross pollination of knowledge. But then, what's the leadership role in this?
I would say it's critical because without leadership support, much of this will not have the fuel to continue to grow and thrive on a year by year basis. And I will say that for any type of program or initiative that survives for many years, it requires evolution because, of course, the environment changes, the problems change. And as a result of that, the program itself has to evolve as well. And in order for that to happen, leadership support is required to provide the not just the funding resources support that is necessary to maintain such a program, but also they have a big voice at the organization. So any times that employees do hear their leaders speak about the importance of innovation and their support for innovation, it provides that level of motivation and engagement that we continue to see year after year. It's because you know what? At the end of the day, they see, you know what? My boss care, my boss's bosses cares about this. So I do want to contribute. I want to be part of solutioning, and this is a great way to participate in that.
And what you highlighted, it's not just the leadership, but you cascade that to the business unit leaders, the leaders of the leaders of the leaders of the employees
Of
all
course.
over. And so, with that said, we understand the human role in innovation, but nowadays we cannot talk about innovation without unpacking the role of the AI. So, how do you see the AI and AI tools are helping or enhancing employee innovation? How can we leverage AI to activate internal innovators in any organization?
I would say that this is a great question in the sense that it's very relevant now and it's going to continue to stay relevant for long time, I would say. In my view, from what I have seen, is that AI will be complementary to the process and the systems that we have
Okay.
today. In other words, what AI cannot replace is the human creativity. It's that creative process in terms of looking at anything in a unique way and bringing forward a solution. However, where AI is going to be of a great help is to be able to um, essentially help you come up with the best idea possible. So it's almost like that assistant that you have by your side to essentially help you provide the best solution possible. Because a lot of the times, what you may think of the most obvious solution may not be the best solution. So AI can potentially help with that process in terms of putting the best idea forward. And when we look at the end-to-end process in terms of from idea submission to implementation, there's many pieces along that process that AI can contribute. So I talked about the ideation
Hmm.
support that we can have from AI, but also from a review and a triaging perspective, I can see great benefits to that. And
Okay.
then also too from a I spoke earlier about thematics, reporting, and all that sort of insights that you can extract from the data. That is also something that AI can be of a great benefit. These are, I would say, most obvious ones,
Hmm.
but over time, I do believe that there will be this continuous process in terms of how AI can best support the internal ideation. And I'm quite excited about it. I think that, as much as internal colleague innovation is exciting, there are many parts of it that require manual work, I'll call it, right? That are
Hmm.
sometimes cumbersome, we'll call it. And AI can certainly be of great support in that regard.
And so, as we're in these very dramatic changing times we're experiencing in our lives, then does this or the entire employee innovation still leave you with a question that you do not have an answer to, but you would love to direct that question to the audience of the podcast?
Yeah, I would say everyone that is involved in the world as a innovation leader has a unique journey, and you are absolutely right that we are living in unprecedented times. So the question that I would like to pose back to the audience is to say, I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear your story in terms of what got you here from an innovation perspective, and how do you see the future of innovation in on the face of AI as well.
I'm curious to see what the audience is going to share with us. Laura, what a wonderful pleasure to host you. Thank you so much for taking your time to dedicate to the audience and share an ounce of your wisdom about Ideate program and corporate innovation. I look forward to a lot of conversations like that and wish you all the best in everything that you do, and especially into the new chapter that you are embarking. And we'll be talking in a future episode about.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, Iliana. Take care.
I was very much looking forward to the conversation with Vlora today because I was truly curious to understand what makes Ideate programs so successful at activating employee innovators. I really loved learning from her firsthand experience on how challenge-based innovation makes this work. But what caught my attention was the origin of the stories, and it was the signals. It was the leaders who caught the signals the employees were already sending. These were not SOS innovation type of signals. These were the signals of colleagues quietly coming together to fix something that was not working so they could make it better. And those were the first signals that sparked the leadership curiosity initially and eventually the leadership buy-in. So leaders, if you are contemplating strategic innovation for your enterprise, go and look for signals. Your employees may already be innovating increments to the processes or products that are not necessarily being recognized as innovation. Build on the momentum that they have already created. And now is a really good time for another reason, the AI. Because research confirms that employees are already using AI to solve frictions in their daily operations, even though they do not have guidance or direction from leadership. BCG report of last year places this percentage at 41% of employees. So go and look for those signals, build on that momentum, and do so by launching your first innovation challenge. And as you do, come back and let us know how are you doing, and share your answer to the question that Vlora left for you, which is, what got you here from an innovation perspective, and how do you see the future of innovation in the face of AI? Vlora and I are listening. We are very curious to learn from you, so please feel free to share your answers and insights via DMs, messages, comments, or even video posts. Just make sure to tag us so we can follow up with you. And if this episode sparked your curiosity how to launch your first innovation challenge, how to activate innovators that were already sending you signals, go to opensolvestudio.com. That's exactly what we do. We help leaders like you, with or without innovation in title, to learn and to master how to design a challenge and activate innovators, innovation, and innovation capabilities across your organization. I'm your host, Iliriana Kaçaniku, and this was another episode of Activate Innovation Lounge. Until next time, stay curious and keep activating.